Hi, and welcome to my channel, Laura's Library Card. So today's video, I'm going to be briefly doing a wrap up of my June reads, and at the second half, I will be talking about my kind of TBR for July. I'm not very good at TBRs and following them, but there are a number of books that I know I want to read in July, so I will for sure mention the ones I know for sure I'm going to read. So this first portion will be the stats run through. If you want to just skip right to my June reads, I'll put timestamps down below. If you want to skip right to the July TBR, I'll put timestamps down in the description. So in June, I finished 10 books, and that was a total of 3,614 pages. Pretty good. That breaks down into 5 romance, 2 nonfiction, and 3 that I'm kind of lumping together in young adult. My average star rating is 3.6. And out of those 10, I read 6 in audiobook format, 2 in ebook format, and 2 in physical paperback format. So I talked about most of these June reads in my previous videos, so I'm going to try to be pretty quick, and I just kind of run through and give the title and author. I'm going to try to do a 1-sentence summary, but I know I'm not very good at that, so I don't know if that'll actually pan out. And I will give my rating and maybe like a 1 or 2 sentence what I thought about the book. So the first book was Ghost by Jason Reynolds, and that's part of the Track series. This book was recommended to me by Books McD. And the summary is that the main character is a middle school age boy named Castle, and he goes by Ghost. He's had kind of a rough family life for the last couple of years, and he's starting to kind of get into trouble, but he joins a city track team, and the coach really kind of helps steer him back onto the right path, and he learns a lot about himself too. I thought this was a cute book. I haven't read a sort of middle grade, I think would be the category here, in a long time. I really liked how Coach helped Ghost, and I really liked how Ghost talked about running and how he really paid attention to the other characters who were in this book. So I ultimately rated it 4 stars. The next book I finished in June was Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, and that was a nonfiction book written by Yuval Noah Harari. I definitely talked about this in a bunch of my videos. It is a nonfiction book that talks about humans over history and how Homo sapiens are currently the only species of humans, but how there used to be multiple human species. And this book discusses what qualities Homo sapiens possesses that potentially allowed us to become like sort of top of the food chain running the world. I really enjoyed this book. It had sort of a lull in the middle for me. I don't know if that was just partly because I had so much other things kind of going on in my life, or it just kind of had a slow spot, but I really liked how it ended, discussing a lot of the sort of future of humanity and genetics and science. So ultimately, I don't really know how to rate nonfiction books, but I enjoyed it, and I felt like it was informative. So I felt like it was a solid 3.5 stars. The next book is The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory. And it is the first book in the Wedding Date series. And this book is about a couple who meet when they are stranded in an elevator. And after he asks her to be his wedding date for his ex's wedding, she kind of takes a chance and says, yeah, sure. And they kind of start this fake relationship that, of course, develops into a real relationship because it's a romance book. For me personally, I didn't love this book. I felt like the characters were really good and interesting, but this sort of had a need to communicate as the main driving source of conflict, and I just felt like it fell flat for me. And it was good, and like the steaminess was pretty good. I don't know. Even now I'm trying to remember what happens, and I felt like the resolution of the book just kind of wasn't there for me. I thought it was pretty well written, so I ended up giving it 3 stars, but I wasn't super impressed. The next book on the list was Beefcake, which is part of the Donner Bakery series, and the author is Jiffy Kate. And honestly, when I saw that I had logged this on my Goodreads, I was like, what? And I had like almost no memory of this, which does not bode well. But yeah, the summary for this book is that it's a romance and the two main characters meet. She's a nurse, I think, and she is averse to violence, but she meets this main character who is like, whose dream is to be like an MMA fighter, and he is a professional fighter, and they kind of have to work out their relationship. I read this because it is part of the Green Valley Chronicles series, but I just really didn't think it was great. I felt like there was a lot of tell, not show. I felt like it was kind of an insta-love situation. I had little to no memory of this book at the end of the month. And so that actually got only like a 2-star rating for me. The next book that I read in June was my first 5-star read of the month, which was Beach Read by Emily Henry. I read this book as part of the Page Turner Book Club, which I will put a link to one of the, to a couple of those channels down below, which has been a really great book club that I've been tuning in 2 months now. Beach Read was their June pick, and I really love this book. The premise that everyone says on the internet is, and I think I even said, is, these two writers who are sort of enemies to lovers. They both agree to write the other person's genre for the summer, and over the course of that summer they fall in love. And that's true. That is a good like one-liner, but that implies a lot more rom-com-y of a plot than what this book actually is. There's also a lot happening because the main character, whose name is January, her father has passed away before the start of the book. It's been like a year. So she's also working through a lot of her own grief and sort of understanding of who her father was. So I just really enjoyed the banter. This was one of my 2 5-star ratings for the month. I really enjoyed the love. I enjoyed their connections, and they did like silly romance, tropey things because January writes romance, and so she takes them on all these this is for research, but like they're dates, essentially at like the carnival, and let's go line dancing. So I really enjoyed this book. It was a 5-star read for me. The next book I finished in June was New Moon by Stephenie Meyer, because I'm doing a Twilight reread, and so this is the second book in the Twilight series. The premise is that when Edward dumps Bella for her own good, she basically has to like piece the pieces of herself back together, and she discovers that there's more than vampires in her area. Her best friend is really a werewolf, and then at the end she has to try to like save Edward. I don't feel like any of those are spoilers because this book's been out for forever and it's so popular. I'm doing this reread of Twilight in anticipation of New Moon coming out, and also of New Moon coming out. I'm in anticipation of Midnight Sun being released at the end of the summer, and because I intend to do a Twilight related video that I've already kind of got plans for. So I think I gave this one like 4 stars, mostly just for the nostalgia and because I'm kind of Team Jacob. The next book that I finished in June, I read during Romanceathon, and that was Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. And I read this all in one sitting. It was so cute. It's so adorable. I love Charlie. I love Nick. The premise of this book is that Charlie is out, he's gay, and it's known in his high school and or secondary school because it's in the UK. And then when he and Nick sort of start up this friendship, Nick doesn't seem bothered to know that Charlie's gay, and he invites Charlie to join the rugby team. And so they start this adorable friendship. It shows there's multiple like montages, but also other scenes where we just see the two of them bonding. We see Nick and Charlie really caring about each other as people. And it sort of becomes clear, Charlie develops a crush on Nick right away. And then as the book progresses, does it seem like Nick is developing more than platonic feelings for Charlie? I love this book. Like I said, I tore through it in one sitting, and I was lucky enough to receive the next couple volumes as a gift from my husband. So those are going to be on my list to read someday. So this was my second 5-star review, 5-star rating of June. The 8th book I finished in June is Hidden Valley Road by Robert Kolker. This was another nonfiction book that I listened to on audio. This book is about a family in America from between the 1940s and the 1960s. They had a dozen children, and ultimately 6 of the boys ended up with a diagnosis of mental illness, and specifically schizophrenia. So this book is a look at schizophrenia through the lens of this family as a focus and what this family personally had to deal with, but also a more broad look at what the medical field and the field of psychotherapy and drugs, and how our understanding of schizophrenia has been helped by this family, especially with genetics research, but also how this family and our understanding of schizophrenia has changed over time. So I found it super interesting. I was kind of constantly flabbergasted that the fact that there was one family with 12 kids and 6 of them had an illness, and it was just like kind of heart-wrenching. But it was also really interesting to see the growth of the medical field and research in this area over time. I rated Hidden Valley Road with 4 stars because it was interesting. The 9th book that I finished in June was also for Romance-a-thon, and that was If I Never Met You by Mhairi McFarlane. So this book, I had a lot of feels. I had a review. I will post the review up above, specifically of this book. The premise is that the main character, Lori, at the start of the book is essentially dumped kind of out of the blue by her boyfriend, Dan, and they've been together for 18 years. Like they've been together half their lives. And so she is still reeling from that breakup, and she sort of starts a fake relationship with a coworker who wants to who's sort of a playboy, and he wants to use this fake relationship to seem like he is not a playboy so that he is impressive to the bosses. So my problem with this book was that my problem with this book is that I went into it thinking it was going to be like a romantic comedy, fake dating, haha, fun. And it's really not that as its genre. I mean, yes, there is romance as a plot line, but there's also so much other stuff happening. So you should check out my review for a little bit more thoughts. I ultimately was kind of disappointed because my understanding of what this book was going to be was not on the mark, and I felt like it was a little too long. So ultimately I rated If I Never Met You only 2.5 stars. I mean, I thought the writing was fine, but like it just was kind of a average read for me. The last book I managed to finish in June was Love Hard, which is the 3rd book in the Hard Play series, which is written by Nalini Singh. So I listened to this book, and the synopsis is that it is a romance book between Jake and Juliet, and he's a big rugby star, and they knew each other in high school, and so when they kind of reconnect here a few years later, they kind of strike up a spark. But she doesn't really want to be part of the limelight, and she has a little bit of scandal attached to her, so he isn't sure he wants to be associated with her scandal. So it's, are they really meant to be, and how will they navigate this, what they want. I thought it was good. I really enjoyed the fact that it took place in New Zealand, and some of the characters were from Samoa. I don't know that much about rugby, but that wasn't a huge factor in the book. I enjoyed the writing. I felt like it was pretty steamy, and I really felt like Jacob's family are the main characters of the other books, and so I'm interested in finding out more about his hunky brothers. So I ultimately rated Love Hard a solid 3.5 stars. So just a quick couple honorable mentions for finishing up June. I read almost all of White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo in June, but I did technically finish it like the 3rd of July. So I will count that for July's books just because that's when I finished it, but I read hadn't quite finished that in June. Also, similarly, I have been doing a Wheel of Time read along, and so I finished Eye of the World July 5th, even though I had read most of it, 75% of it in June. A book I also have read before and that I intended to work on in June that I mentioned in a couple of videos is Daughter of the Forest by Juliet Marillier. I was doing a reread with my cousin and I got, 60% of the way through, and it just got put down because there were other things that I wanted to finish first. So for July, I don't typically make TBRs just because I'm not very good at sticking with them, but books that I intend to read and or strongly feel that I will read in July include Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. I got this book out and read only the first maybe 2 or 3 chapters for Romanceathon, and then it got pushed to the side so that I could read If I Never Met You, but I still have it checked out and I've made a little bit more progress and I'm enjoying that book. So I intend for that to be one of the books that I finish in July. Another book I hope to start in July, but I know I won't finish in July because it's part of this Wheel of Time read along, is The Great Hunt by Robert Jordan, which is the next book in the Wheel of Time series. Another book that I know I'll finish in July is I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara because I've been listening to it at work and I am already 85% of the way finished, and so I will knock that out tomorrow. I also intend to read Eclipse, which is the 3rd book in the Twilight series by Stephenie Meyer, because I am doing this reread in anticipation of Midnight Sun and for my Twilight video. And I'm also going to be reading A Song Below Water by Bethany C. Morrow. So this is a book that I am going to be doing a buddy read with my friends Savannah and Cecily. I will put both of their channels down in my description. They kind of reached out to me and said, hey, let's read a book together. And so I just got that book out from the library on ebook, and it sounds really interesting. It's like mermaids, but they're not really mermaids or sirens. There's mermaids and sirens. I really don't know that much about it other than the cover is gorgeous. Like, I'll put a picture here. The cover is gorgeous, and I read the blurb and I remember thinking it sounded really cool, and I'm really looking forward to reading that to discuss with those guys. The July choice for the Page Turner Book Club, which the links to those channels are down below, is called The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. I don't really know that much about this book either, but I've been really enjoying our read-along, or not read-alongs, but book club with Page Turner Book Club, and the discussions have been really cool, and the books have been both good so far. So I already have that on request, and I intend to read it for July by the end because I want to attend their live show. I do have a book or two. I have 2 arcs out from NetGalley. I don't know if I'm going to get to them. I would like to, but I'm not going to announce them here just because I know if I announce them, I probably won't get to them. A couple other books that I have sort of on my probably if I can get to it list, slash I kind of end up sticking romance in between other books anyway. So some of the other books that I have kind of waiting in the wings to fill in a gap when I'm looking for it are Insidious by Aletha Romig, Queen Move by Kennedy Ryan, and Trade Me by Courtney Milan. The last book I'll mention is Punk 57. I got about 50% of the way through that book while I was participating in Romanceathon, and I have the book out on request from the library because I didn't finish it because I poorly planned things and it expired. Someone told me it was on Kindle Unlimited, so someday I do intend to get a Kindle Unlimited free trial. So maybe that is July's plan. I don't know. But if I end up getting Punk 57 out from the library, I want to finish the second half of that book. So there we go. That is my June wrap up and stats and what I have kind of planned for my July TBR. I'm not used to planning out my TBRs quite that thoroughly, but I just kind of took a realistic look at what live shows Buddy reads and, book clubs I'm going to be participating in, and kind of made a list. And I think that I probably will get through a number of those books on my TBR. So if you have heard any authors or books mentioned in this video that you love or hate, or that you're reading too, please comment down below and tell me what you're thinking, or why you loved them or why you hated them. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked hearing me ramble on and on, go ahead and subscribe. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and comment and do all the things. Thanks so much. Bye. The premise of this book, or am I recording?